Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Battle for Azeroth class review. Today we're doing the Demon Hunter, and it's an interesting one because, of course, it was our first new class since Mists of Pandaria's Monk. It was designed to be very mobile, fun, accessible to new players, and it was a spec that went through quite a journey during the Legion Alpha, Beta, and even through the patches of Legion. But of course, BFA, it's Blizzard's first major change to do, or major chance to do large changes or overhauls, so it's definitely interesting to see how the Demon Hunter fares in this expansion. And once you're done with this video, you should check out today's sponsor, Icy Veins. They're the largest destination for World of Warcraft class guides. They have just hired on 26 writers for Battle for Azeroth, and they have put a tremendous amount of effort to getting all of their pre-patch guides ready and good to go. You can find those pre-patch guides linked below, and they've also been a fantastic help in making this series. And of course, it's a site that personally I've been using for years, which is really no surprise to anyone. So big thanks to them, and let's get right into the video. Okay, so Havoc had quite a time in Legion. It had, the rather Marmite-like momentum build and the automated gameplay of Demon Blades, but there certainly were strengths. It had amazing animations, a super strong power fantasy, and, really solid damage, and it created a spec that, for most players, was actually quite fun to play. So, let's go and see what's happened in Battle for Azeroth, starting off with the baseline changes to the spec. So quite a lot has actually changed to make this spec work without its artifact weapon. You see, back in Legion, the artifact was responsible for really so much in the way of small mechanics, including having a fury cap that was higher than 100. That went a long way to making the spec feel better, so when the BFA Havoc DH originally only had 100 fury, it really suffered. But Blizzard have since chosen to make it 120 fury baseline, which feels way better. Having a larger fury bar makes it lets you manage more, and it allows you to do things like, just have your Chaos Strike Fury refund feel a little bit better. With 120 Fury, that means you can get 3 back-to-back Chaos Strikes, likely 4 with the refund mechanic. Now, on the topic of Chaos Strike, it's a little bit different. So, as you may know, it costs 40 Fury, but it has a chance to refund half of its Fury cost. Now, back in Legion, that was based on you getting a critical strike, but in BFA, it's just a flat 40%. This divorces the spec from crit as a stat, at least in that way, and it means that you won't have to wait until you have generally higher stats with more gear for it to feel good. Then I-Beam has been changed. It used to have a decently long cooldown, but that cooldown would be reduced by absorbing soul fragments. That was, of course, because of an artifact trait, which is now dead, so the BFA I-Beam is a bit different. It now has a cooldown of just 30 seconds, it costs 30 fury down from 50, and it does 50% additional damage to your primary target. This is decently significant for pure single target scenarios, where it basically now makes I-Beam an important part of your rotation, so that's really awesome. Let's just roll through the rest of the other baseline changes. Chaos Nova's stun does not last for as long. Demonic Wards has been added, which reduces damage taken by 10%. Torment is in, giving you a taunt, and Consume Magic is in, removing a beneficial effect and giving you 20 Fury. And really, that is most of it. So far, things are quite similar, but they're just made to work without the artifact. I think the main difference really is I-Beam being a more core part of the spec in pure single target scenarios, just making it more desirable because of its primary target damage boost. So with that stuff covered, let's head into the baseline gameplay. So as you may expect, you generate your primary resource Fury by casting Demon's Bite, which is a simple melee ability. Then you spend that Fury on Chaos Strike, which has a 40% chance to refund 20 Fury when used. We're then going to be using I-Beam on cooldown, then if AoE is called for, we'll be using Blade Dance, throwing that one into the mix, and then of course you've got Meta for your big cooldown. Really, the core is the same here, just the few tweaks as you can see, so to really get to grips with the changes, we need to take a look at the talents. So with talents, I'm changing up the way that I cover them now that the pre-patch is out. Instead of doing it in a very exhaustive manner, I'm just going to cover the typical fun builds that are popular, as well as the talents that stand out individually. So it will be a little bit more opinion and a little bit less just me reading things out to you, which I think should be better. First though, let's cover some of the new toys and just important changes within the talents. The first thing is, because I-Beam is more reliable and the lower cooldown, it means the Blind Fury is kind of bumped up a bit. Then Fellblade basically has a lower proc rate, gives you slightly more Fury though, but basically you'll flip between that Fellblade or I-Beam based on what type of content that you're going for. As for me, I really enjoy both, but mostly Blind Fury, because the lower proc rate of Fellblade does take away from some of the pace that it added that I previously liked. Now, the next here has got one of my favorite new abilities in this spec, Immolation Aura. So it gives you a bunch of resources over 8 seconds, it's got a low cooldown, and it's just really fun and great for AoE. And then we've got Demon Blades, which is a strange one to talk about. out, there's no great skill, right, in throwing GCDs into Demon's Bite, so I suppose putting on Demon Blades, which just automates that into your auto attack, like, that allows you to react more quickly to things. You're less likely to be, say, midway through a GCD when you want to use an ability. So it's kind of weird. Like, yeah, it's more spamming, there's a little bit more downtime, but it doesn't particularly change from a skill perspective the decision making that you're going to be doing. I don't know, I mean, I enjoyed Devastator and a Prot Warrior. I initially didn't like this, so maybe I have an evolving opinion in that one. Kind of tricky to know, but overall what you're going to find is that you're probably going to be going with Demon Blades and Fellblade in single target, and then Immolation Aura plus I-Beam in AoE. Then let's hop on down to the 102 tier, where we actually now have Fel Barrage, so it's there, and it now competes with Trial of Ruin and Fel Mastery. And it's a kind of funny tier because Trial of Ruin it's free damage, right? It's dead easy to use, it just augments your blade dance and yeah, performs fantastically. But then of course Fel Barrage has the benefit of being a super strong AoE cooldown that can be used when it's most needed, which can be super useful. And then in terms of other offensives, we do have another really important one of the 106th here, that's Dark Slash. Currently, Dark Slash is not performing that well overall, and it's probably not going to be widely used unless changes occur. Now, on paper, it's a Marmite-like talent, so some people will love it, others will kind of hate it, but right now, I think few will use it. So the way that it works is that it leaves a debuff on the target that increases the damage they take from Chaos Strike. So basically, it's a cooldown, or a damage window that's on a cooldown. That means you could prepare for it, say with Blind Fury Generation, or maybe an Emulation Aura beforehand. Now, I found the gameplay of it to be really fun, especially with Demonic and Blind Fury, but at the end of the day, most of us we're going to put on Trial of Ruin and First Blood, and we're not going to have to bother thinking about mechanics like this. As for the rest of the spec, well, you know, there's not really much through the rest of the talents. I'm just thinking of other things. While Demonic, like, it's not super strong now, but it does feel better because of the increased frequency. Then Momentum is on the final tier. It takes the place of where Fel Barrage was, and it's a merger of a few other talents, which gives you the Fury Generation from successful Vengeful Retreat hits, and then the damage bonus after using Fel Rush. Now, the duration of the damage buff has actually been increased, which will make it a little bit nicer to use. Now, I did not enjoy this in Legion, to be completely honest with you, but it does exist as a viable option in BFA if you want it. The duration change does make it a bit nicer to use than in Legion, so, well, and it also takes up less talent space in the tree, so all in all, I do think this one's kind of a win. And then with Demonic, I absolutely love it, being in meta is just really cool as hell, and it really benefits from the more reliable cooldown of I-Beam. However, its performance, as I said, is a little bit below other options. So overall, the talents work out, I think, quite well in the post-artifact world. I'm actually happy enough to trade my artifact weapon ability for Immolation Aura. Now, in terms of the common specs, well, in single target, you're probably going Fel Blade, the two Blade Dance talents, Demon Blades, and then Nemesis. Of course, the two Blade Dance talents, they combine to make Blade Dance a part of your single target rotation and do an extra dot, so it slots very nicely and simply into the rotation, and, you know, it's pretty much just some smashy fun that's kind of easy. Really, this spec, it barely ever gets in the way of the content that you're doing, and if you're having maybe, if you have to, you know, do a raid a few pints into the night, it's a fantastic option. Now, if Blizzard were to make, say, a Dark Slash build viable, then I could see myself playing that. It's a lot of fun in beta, but it is a lot more involved, so at the end of the day, if you can do almost the same damage with a less complex build, well, I can't really begrudge someone for choosing the easier option. Now, if they were to change anything, then I would probably want a more interesting version of the Nemesis talent, which, I mean, you can see it on the screen, right? You just put it on the target, you do more damage. It's not really super interactive, in my view. So let's do the overall opinions. I think this is a polished up version of a spec that you already know. So sure, you've lost your artifact ability for AoE scenarios, but if you're doing Mythic Plus, that's probably going to be replaced by you rolling with Immolation Aura anyway, which is more interactive and fun because it goes with your resource mechanics. Now, if you're the type of player who just wants a easy but pretty fun spec to play, such that you can focus on the actual fights, I think this is a wonderful option. Just go with a double Blade Dance talent build, and as I said, Dark Slash, yeah, it can be fun, but it's not doing amazingly right now, so it probably won't be used. So overall, I'd say that nothing is really lost from Legion that matters too much to me, and not a massive amount is gained, and if, say, Dark Slash does become very dominant, then some players might might not like it, similar to how Momentum had a very mixed response in Legion. Now, the rest of the Demon Hunter is still super intact, especially because they bumped up the Fury cap from its earlier numbers on beta. So overall, I would say this is a super solid spec that's received some welcome tweaks and additions to work in a post-artifact world. There's some great new toys there, like Immolation Ore being a highlight for me, and Dark Slash being something that personally I think is actually really cool and fun to use. This could absolutely be a spec that I would see myself playing as a sort of chilled out alt kind of thing. And also, like, it does just look and feel cool as hell to use. Double jump, super fun. Like, fell rushing all over the place is super fun. So it's overall, I think, a pretty damn fun overall package that slots into modern World of Warcraft very well. And then next up, we've got Vengeance. So Vengeance really was a fun pick-up and play tank that felt really solid to me in Legion. It brought a pretty unique blend of fast-paced gameplay, very high movement, and self-healing, and it successfully carved out its own gameplay niche within the tanking world. So let's go and have a look at how it's doing in Battle for Azeroth, beginning with the baseline changes to the spec. So this spec is, for the most part, going to feel very similar to players who played it during Legion. The spells are mostly the same, however, some important tweaks have been made here and there to the spec that are definitely worth knowing about. So first, I need to explain the resources. Demon Hunters, they rip soul fragments out of their enemies, and these soul fragments, they lay on the floor, and they can be used as a resource by abilities such as Soul Cleave and Spirit Bomb. You then have Pain, which really, it's very similar to a warrior's Rage. With Battle for Azeroth actually removing Rage and Pain generation on receiving damage. Now, the Vengeance Demon Hunter's active mitigation, it no longer costs Pain, which really makes Pain a lot less of an important part of the spec for me. It really just feels like it's a part of your offensive toolkit now. So your main Pain and Soul Fragment generator is Shear. So Shear now has a 100% chance to generate a Soul Fragment, and I expect the reliability of that is going to go down well. Certainly I've liked it so far. So that's what's up with Shear. Now, it generates Pain and Soul Fragments. Then your main spender is still Soul Cleave, which is a frontal damage cleave that deals damage, it heals you, and it consumes up to 2 soul fragments. So there's the difference. It consumes up to 2 fragments instead of consuming all of them like it did in Legion. This gives you a bit more control over your soul fragments, which does open up more interesting uses of your soul fragments, though it is at the cost of Soul Cleave consuming them all at once, which was a pretty nice burst of healing, I suppose, because the soul fragments heal you. Now, the healing with the soul fragments is actually a bit different now. They now heal you for 8% of the damage taken in the last 5 seconds at a minimum of 1% of your max health. This is quite different to the flat healing based version that was based on your AP from Legion. It's probably not going to change your usage that much. You'll still suck up soul fragments whenever you take damage, but the behind the scene numbers are a little bit different. Now, a number of important talents all work by consuming the available soul fragments, so by having a regular ability like Soul Cleave be capped at consuming 2, we now have a situation where it competes with some talents like Spirit Barrier and or Soul Bomb and Spirit Barrier a little bit less. Now, in terms of other changes, well, the typical BFA tank changes are here. Empower Wards has been removed. Now, it reduced incoming magic damage, and broadly reducing incoming magic damage is something that Blizzard are nerfing, and they want to make tanks a bit less self-sufficient than they were in Legion. Then our Mastery has been tweaked, and it's actually quite welcome, so it causes the armor bonus of Demon Spikes to scale based on agility, which makes agility a bit more useful. And as for Demon Spikes itself, well, it's still your active mid, but it's been changed to be based off armor now, and its recharge has been increased by 5 seconds to 20 seconds, and its parry chance increase is down from 20 to 15. So basically, it's a little bit weaker. We then have Demonic Wards, which is our beefy tank passive. It's changed. It now reduces incoming damage by 10% down from 20, but it increases our armor by 80% up from 75. Now, of course, you know, it's Battle for Azeroth, so tanks are also going to be doing a bit more threat management, because tanks now generate 4x threat of DPS players, down from like 14x plus in Legion, so you'll probably have to deal with that, though to be honest with you, experienced tanks are going to find that threat generation to be totally fine. The only times where you'll have issues is maybe with less experienced tanks. So that's pretty much what is up with the big changes. Let's just go into how that boils into the baseline gameplay before we hit up the talents. And as you can kind of imagine, it's pretty similar. You cast Cheer to generate pain and soul frags. You then maintain your immolation aura, which, it's a good thing to do. You then spend your pain and soul fragments, ideally on, say, your soul cleave, if you've just taken damage. Now, if physical damage is on the way, maybe we're going to be casting demon spikes for the armor increase and the parry. Then Fiery Brand is another cooldown you can use to reduce your incoming damage, and it's relatively more important with the removal of empowered wards, though of course it's on the GCD now. Then of course we have, we've got Metamorphosis when we're taking super heavy damage, and as for the rest of your toolkit, it's pretty much the same. Really, as is the norm for Demon Hunters. It's extremely sparse by default, and you only really get the full picture when you look at the talents. So let's hop over to the Vengeance talents. Okay, so there are some important changes here with brand new talents being added and some artifact traits actually being integrated as well. Now, there's not really anything earth-shattering until we get down to the 104 tier, which is where we see Fracture, which has been very much looked at. It's totally different to Legion. It now is a charge system, and it generates a big burst of pain, so basically you would go for that instead of having to spam Sheer all the time. It's actually pretty fun, and I find the rhythm of less frequent but larger sort of pain generation to be a bit more enjoyable. Then when we go over to the 108 tier, Blade Turning has been removed. We've got a new talent in there called Gluttony. So Gluttony causes consuming a soul fragment to have a chance to activate meta for 5 seconds, which is the same as an artifact trait from Legion. To be honest, I don't like it. I mean, sure, it's nice to have, but it's so RNG based that you can't really use it as a reliable part of your defensive toolkit, so it's not a thing that you can play around. Then Spirit Bomb is back, but it is actually a bit different. So it now costs pain, but it will still consume up to 5 soul fragments and explode, dealing damage to nearby enemies and giving them frailty. So you then heal for 10% of all the damage you deal to frail targets. So basically it's a strong AoE self-heal, though it only heals 10% of the damage down from the 20 of Legion. Then Fell's Devastation is still on that tier, but no longer costs pain and really isn't that great at the minute. But then finally we tackle the 110 tier. So Soul Barrier has been reworked to be a bit more simple. Previously it would consume all soul fragments to put a big shield on you, and that shield actually couldn't be destroyed. Instead, if it got too low, damage would go through to your health bar. This is because every soul fragment that you consumed during the shield's 12-second life would cause the shield to grow in health, so you would be continuously topping up the shield. Well, that gameplay is gone. The Battle for Azeroth Soul Barrier now consumes up to 5 soul fragments to give you an absorb shield. Basically, that's it. It's been simplified. We then have a new talent called Void Reaver that's pretty simple. It causes enemies hit by Soul Cleave to deal 6% less damage to you for 12 seconds. And basically, this is just going to be a flat damage taken, reduction that you'll probably just, maybe scale into AoE really well, as an example. So it's a pretty viable choice. Then there's Last Resort, which is back, and it still causes a fatal blow to instead give you 30% health and put you into meta, but only once every 8 minutes, which means it is incredibly powerful because it will save your ass with 0 skill, which is just super good. So even if you're flushed and falling to pieces, this one does, it does it itself. So probably what's going to happen on that tier is you're going to be going with maybe Void Reaver for like AoE or Mythic Plus, maybe Soul Barrier if magic damage is the thing you've got to deal with, and then Last Resort as maybe a default for like progression content. So overall thoughts on this spec. Yup, it's a pretty simple and fun tanking spec, as it was in Legion really. Moving around really fast with Infernal Strike is super fun, and their core set of abilities is pretty damn meaty and satisfying. Though, without its talents, it certainly is very simple. Thankfully though, we have got many good talents with Soul Barrier, Spirit Bomb, and the revamped Fracture, all being things that I enjoy quite a bit. And they do help to round out the toolkit and give the spec a bit more complexity, a few more options that really I think they should have by default. I really would like it if there was 1 or 2 more things that were just in the default of this spec, and perhaps if the talents were to add maybe a little bit more, I think that would probably be good, because it is a little bit in the simple side for me. And I suppose that's also on top of Blizzard removing Empower Wards as one of your buttons baseline, which, it just makes it feel like it's a little bit sparse. Now that said, another issue for me is I find Soul Frags really annoying because of how you pick them up when you walk near them. I would rather they were just a secondary resource that lived under your health bar. So perhaps getting more resources and health after killing an enemy could be bumped over to sort of take over from that mechanic. I just don't find that it adds much gameplay being able to pick up Soul Frags just by walking over them. So I kind of wish that was actually smoothed away. And then I suppose one criticism that I maybe have is that pain feels a bit redundant now. It used to be that with the old Fracture, you could kind of channel Pain into DPS to like burn off excess Pain, but with that being removed, you're kind of just soul cleaving a lot. Now, I do get the design problem. Pain risks being the same as Rage for like a Prot Warrior and a Guardian Druid or whatever, but yeah, perhaps just a more interesting way to burn off Pain would be a nice part of this spec, though this is somewhat counteracted by how our Pain generation is a little bit lower, but our Soul Fragment generation is a little bit higher. So yeah, as you can see, it's definitely a spec that I have criticisms of, but overall, it still is quite accessible and fun to jump into. Now, I would say just in terms of the broad tank philosophy, yeah, you know, Blizzard seemed to feel the tanks were too self-sufficient in Legion to the point where it was hurting healer gameplay and maybe causing balance issues for Blizz, so the gameplay seems to be just to, or the idea is to nerf tanks defensively to give healers more to do and then uptick the importance of mob management with threat, which makes that a more impactful part of gameplay. Now, for me, this ends up being really fun, and mob management is something I actually enjoy in this Demon Hunter quite a lot. Really, I just think that being a Demon Hunter is really nice in terms of the movement, the gameplay. Overall, it's a pretty smooth and fun experience that you can just hop into, which for me makes it pretty much like a perfect kind of alt class. Okay, so let's round this one off with just my Demon Hunter thoughts, and for the most part, they've not changed massively. Both of these specs, they're a bit in the simple side, but they do have fun mechanics that don't feel needlessly complex. Indeed, some of their mechanics are really super fun to use, and it's a case where I think sometimes we overpraise complex things because praising complex things makes us look good, right? I've definitely found that to be like a pressure for me to do on YouTube. So, it's simple and it's fun to play. I could definitely run with one of these as an alt. So I do feel positively towards them, but it's not to the degree where I would choose one over a monk. And on the, touching on that complexity issue, yes, it means for me it's really pick up and play, but there are certainly more complex specs in the game that I feel like I would get more depth out of over time. So really with this spec, if you want a really fun alt to just mess around on, I think this is pretty much perfect. If you want to play the game casually with your friends and you're just interested in running through some dungeons, having a bit of fun, I also think this is great. If you are super interested in really just the fights at hand and you don't want a class that's full of complexity and stuff, because, even if, say, you're a Mythic Raider, and obviously a Havoc Demon Hunter will be viable in Mythic, and you're just sitting there thinking, well, I just want to focus on what the boss is doing. Well, this is probably a very good option. Though, if you want your class gameplay to be a really large part of the game for you, then maybe I would go with something else that's a bit different. So there you go. That is my thoughts on the Demon Hunter. As always, it's a pretty interesting one because of what Blizzard are trying to do with this class in the game, but yeah, I'm dead keen to hear what your thoughts are. And of course, do check out today's sponsor, Icy Veins. Their pre-patch guides are out. They're awesome. They will get you up to speed super damn quick. So the links to those are down below. Thank you very much for watching this video. Big thank you to Icy Veins for sponsoring, and I will see you in the next class review.